First, I want to give a shout out just momentarily to our competitor that could not be here due to health reasons. I wish he were here today. The more bards that can compete, we all win every time the bards compete. So, my Lord Hugh. Your name just went out of my head again.
Seonag.
Huh?
Seonag. Like Daniel.
Seonag.
I'm just going to show you.
Seonag, yes.
Seonag.
You two have announced that you wish to compete today, correct?
We have.
Excellent. And how should we decide which will go first?
We've decided.
You've decided.
We have.
We
We spoke
confer-
amongst ourselves.
You've spoke?
But
Enlighten us, please.
there is a problem amongst us. I must confess I am sorry as an event steward to have you
What?
hold the anticipation,
Oh dear.
but our incoming Baroness has made an entrance of grandness for this event, and we want to acknowledge our incoming Baroness and our incoming Baron.
Welcome, Your Excellencies.
And now, was it dice? Cards?
It was
Was it dice?
a simple
Cards? Was it a coin flip?
Milady is performed first.
Lady Shoga. What?
Seonag.
Seonag. I'm terrible with names. I have to memorize them. It takes a long while. You are Arcarius to Andrus Trumark. You are also a yeoman of the Baron. Arthur.
Just Sergeant.
Sergeant of the
For
barony. For Bardic. Please take the stage. It is all yours.
Your Excellencies and my assembled friends, I would like for you this afternoon to travel with me to a place and a time. This time is nebulous. It can be tomorrow, it can be yesterday, it can be 1,000 years, it can be 100 years to the future. But the place, imagine a meadow amongst the woods. Just as the pre-dawn lights the sky and the last of the stars twinkle out, mist rolls and twirls among the grasses and the wildflowers and curls out and climbs up mighty trees of cedar and redwood and fir. There's not a sound at first. In the distance you think you hear them. A jingle, maybe a small thump. And as you strain to hear, you will see along with me, faintly at first, through the mist, a figure, and then another, and another. And as they become clearer, you see emerging from these great mists two great armies. And they stand on either side of this meadow. Oh, see how the mist lies over the field. The morning of battle has come. Soft in the glen comes the muffled sound of men and the murmur of a battle drum. As the light of the sun shines over the hill, it scatters the mist from the green. And there in the clear are the warriors of Antir, our black and golden banner can be seen. Fill our cups with yellow wine or beer, we will stand together, never fear. And we'll drink down a toast to the brave and bonny host that fights for the banner of Antir. I know the song. Oh, see them advance as a wall of steel, each man with his sword and his shield. Now they charge with a cheer for the honor of Antir, to live or to die upon the field. Fill our cups with ale or wine or beer, We will stand together, never fear, and we'll drink down a toast for the brave and bonny host that fights for the banner of Antir. Near many a fire there's a lady fair who waits for her love to return, and her needle's in her thread, or she's baking out the breads and dreaming of the touch for which she yearns. Fill our cups with ale or wine or beer, we will stand together, never fear, and we'll drink down a toast to the brave and bonny host that fights for the banner of Antir. To the crest of the hill fight the brave and the bold, where the slain thickly lie on the field. And there in the clear stand the warriors of Antir. The foeman at last is meant to yield. Fill our cups with ale or wine or beer, we will stand together, never fear, and we'll drink down a toast to our brave and bonny host that fights for the banner of Antir. Oh, strike up your lute, all you minstrels, whose skill is renowned far and wide. Come tell us again of the mighty band of men who carried the battle for our side. Fill our cups with ale or wine or beer, we will stand together, never fear. Antir! And we'll drink down a toast for the brave and bonny host that fights for the banner of Antir. Yes, we'll drink down a toast for the brave and bonny host that fights for the banner of Antir.
My Lord Hugues, you are next.
Indeed, indeed.
And since I announced that, of course, she was a sergeant of the barony, aren't you an apprentice?
I am, and
You are?
recently so.
Recently so. To who?
To our good not next baron. but
To the not next baron.
To the not next baron.
Who will recuse himself from judging.
Soon to be but Master Aryan again.
The field is yours.
Well, thank you, thank you. It's always hard to follow someone, and the context is, I've written something in a period style, inspired. I started with Guillaume de Machaut, which some of you may know, who wrote period music in the early to middle 14th century. And as I started exploring the verse and things around that, I decided that Guillaume de Machaut and his ballade style was really just not the style for me. And I thought, what would be wonderful would be to take something ever so much more complex and step all the way to the 5 stanza chant royale with the envoi, and to do that in a style, that was more English than French. French verse or song it leans far more into romantic love and comedy than into deeds of arms. But there are a few examples, particularly from poets like Eustace Deschamps, who was a fairly famous diplomat for the French crown in the later 14th century, which is absolutely my core period, and I love. So the poem itself is called Le Sang sur la Lande, and is written about a famous deed of arms, a combat between some Breton forces and some English forces in 1351 in Brittany. One side for Charles de Blois, everybody knows his famous doublet with the Grand Assiette sleeves, and Jean de Montfort, who was the once and every other Duke of Brittany. And he would fight for the English for a while, and then he would fight for the French crown for a while. Well, there were 2 castles about as far apart as, say, Kingston and Polsbo. One was Josselin Castle, held by the forces under Jean de Beaumanoir. And he had a long-standing personal feud with Robert Bimbro, who held a castle called Ploermel, about 8 miles away. And one day, Jean de Beaumanoir gets 2 or 3 of his knights, and he's like, you know what? I'm going to call that guy out. So he gets on his horse, and he rides across the countryside, he rides up to the gates, and he's like, Robert Bimbro, come out, we need to fight. And Robert Bimbro thinks this is a fantastic idea. But he takes it up a notch and he said, you know, coming out today and fighting, just the 2 or 3 of us, really wouldn't do this grudge we have purpose, and it really wouldn't do honor to our ladies and to our lords. So they're castellans of these 2 castles. They don't actually own them. And he said, he challenges back and he says, you know what would be the greatest thing that we could do was like, I get like 20 or 30 of my guys, and you get like 20 or 30 of your guys, and we'll show up in the middle on Wednesday morning and we'll have it do. And so they do. They fight all day, fight so long, it's tournament style. They just pick fights, they fight in single combat, they fight in group combat. At the very end of it, 9 of the people on the English side are killed at the end, and 4 on the Breton French side. The English, they're German mercenaries, and the few Bretons who are fighting with them, those who survive are taken captive and they're taken back to Castle Jocelyn and held for ransom. That's kind of the end of the story. This is kind of documented. I took it primarily from Froissart's Chronique, which is a story from the late 14th century, early 15th century, and there's like 47 different versions. And it's a couple of page article about this particular event inside the larger Chronique. But the version that I've chosen to write from, my inspiration, takes a much later period. I'm dead 100 years by that point. But right around the 1460s, a fellow named Pierre Lebeau writes an account of the battle, and he romanticizes it quite a bit, as the French will do. And he says that Beaumanoir and the force of Breton French won because they trusted in God, they had faith, while the nasty, dirty Englishmen trusted in the prophecies of Merlin to carry the day. And so I have tried to encapsulate both of those in the style. And it's not like English poetry where everything is iambic pentameter and it has perfect verse. If you're familiar with sonnets or Shakespeare, it has a particular rhythm. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You know, it doesn't have that. This particular style of poetry is called form feast, and there's a few different structures, but it's 7 lines per stanza with 8 syllables per stanza with a specific rhyme scheme that matches that. And so learning that and trying to compose in a language that I hadn't studied in nearly 40 years was quite an exercise. And as I learned, all works of art are never complete, but I took a lot of faith from the people posting in the groups who were sewing on their garb on Thursday and Friday night. And I do have my book with me because I didn't fully memorize the entire thing. I struggled so hard. There's stuff going on in life right now. But then I remembered as I drove home from Tacoma from work, our own Sir Brand, who carries his book when he does verse and song. And I remembered our very own Harold, who has been speaking at court, the same presentations year on year on year, who always carries their court book to make sure that they respect the word that they did. So I got about 2/3 of the way through it. I was like, oh my God, something's got to give. Otherwise, I'm going to pop. And God bless Master Ari. And he said, what do you do? What do you do? I said, I love poetry. And he's like, well, where do you do it? I said, I read it to my wife. And I do a little metal work, like the piece on my hat. He's like, please stop stealth arting and do something that we can see. And so that is the inspiration that brought me here today. Was I had a piece that I really wanted to do in a period style, inspired by the work of these very famous people from the period that I try so hard to represent accurately. So I will say this started probably late August, and it is titled La Sang sur la Lande par Seigneur Hugues de Bertoncourt, most commonly Hugh. And it is written in modern French. Period French it's a bit different. It's kind of like trying to compose in Chaucer. It's not quite modern French. So, sur l'impact de Jocelyn, face à Plurmel, plein d'arrogance, Beaumanoir pour dire sur ton abimbro fit défiance. Il accepte sans hésitance, guidé par Merlin enchanteur, armé de foi et d'espérance dans la lande, le sang rougit. Un défi pour 2 châtelains, pour prouver notre vaillance, pour l'honneur et pour nos destins, j'ai scellé notre alliance. Que brille en nous notre ardeur et que nos dames sont en silence. Dans les landes, le sang rugit. Sous un ciel sombre et incertain, les épées de whist bouillance, tremblotant sur le chemin, chaque coup marque la balance. Blessé, je crie, au bois, je meurs! Bois ton sang, dit un pouls en transe. Dans les landes, le sang rugit. Sur la bannière, notre destin lance l'éveil avec puissance, guidé par un noble chemin, nos cours brûlent d'endurance, par l'amour et par vaillance. Nos courages plient nos cours, nos âmes chantant en silence. Dans le land, le sang rugit. La légende court au lointain de 30 épouses en alliance. Je revois nos pavés de main, que nos noms brillent en vaillance, que la mémoire garde nos cours, regardant notre souvenance. Dans le land, le sang rugit. An aside, usually this form of poetry addresses a prince or a king or some noble, and that's very common in the form. I have chosen to address this directly to my lady, who is my inspiration. Oh madame, votre présence aguerrit mon corps, mon âme et mon corps. Vos mots sont mon espérance. Dans le land, le sang rugit.